Warning. This podcast is about to open the sealed section of spirituality.
Hey you, yeah you, we see you, you divine human being.
And we are calling you to come home.
We are ready to talk about the real shit. We're going to get real about life as a divine human being.
The good, the not so great, spirituality and taboo. Divinely Human is the podcast that's all about what it means to be human in a spiritual context.
We know it's not just about being spiritual, it's about being human too.
And that means changing poopy nappies and channeling angels.
Sometimes even at the same time. It's time for us to stop making other people's noise our own soundtrack of life.
Let's make some waves together so that we can all ride them together and create deep resonance, a sense of home in this crazy world.
Pour yourself a coffee
Or a glass of wine if that's your potion.
and sit down with your new favorite spiritual sisters
As we go on a journey together into what it means to be
a divine human being.
on this spiritual journey.
Howdy, spiritual partners and friends in this space. Welcome to this episode of the Divinely Human podcast. I am your co-host, Aleisha.
And I am Tanita.
And we're excited to saddle up and get into this episode today. Hint, hint, hint. Love the theme I've got going on that was totally impromptu. This will be fun. I'm excited.
I was not expecting that intro. You said you were going to do something new and you came through. And because of the theme of this episode, which we'll let you in on in a little second, it's even more hilarious. So I love that.
So, look, it's always the way. It is always the way. We're always spicing it up, and I love that about us. So,
Yeah, me too. Well, we actually had a conversation a couple of days ago. God, time is moving so weirdly at the moment. But, and I thought it'd be cool to bring it on the podcast, talk a little bit more about masculine and feminine energy. I think this is an important conversation right now, especially. We've got Saturn moving into Pisces. We've got a lot of, polarizing energies kind of coming together. And I've been seeing a lot of content on Instagram lately about trusting the divine feminine flow and accepting when she's calling you to rest. And while I totally agree with this information, there has been certain posts that I've seen with the undercurrent of like the divine feminine doesn't do shit. And I just disagree with that completely. And I'm curious to see like what your perspective with that whole kind of framework around the masculine is the do and the feminine is the stillness. What's your point of view?
my point of view, and what I just want to say right now as well, is the fact that we're still not, like, the fact that society and, like, women themselves and men, they perceive the feminine energy as rest and just rest. I think that tells us that there is no value put into the things that we create or our creative ability. Because if there was value put into that or seen in that, then instead of saying, feminine energy is resting and not doing anything, they would say, no, it's your creative life force, right? So I think that's kind of where it's all gone askew. And yeah, my point of view is exactly, same as yours. I think that we're sold short when it comes to, divine feminine energy and what that actually means and what that looks like in day-to-day life. People think that it's just sitting around resting and drinking cacao and, steaming our yonis, but it is not. It is not. And I saw this post the other day, and I'm going to find it right now while I speak, because it was so powerful. Okay. And it's probably a little bit triggering for people as well.
I'm very intrigued.
But the post said, and this is digressing a little bit, but kind of not, it said, it's the weak, light feminine energy that gets the credit for the work the dark feminine puts in for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of like we have kind of given a little bit of credit to like the divine feminine when it comes to, what we create and stuff like that. But it's mainly just seen as like meditation and like flowy things, resting and, self-care and all that stuff. But really there's this whole other aspect to our feminine energy that does such deep work. And we are so actively creating when we're in that zone that I think that we need to speak about the fact that it isn't just that masculine energy that is the driving force behind our actions and what we're creating in this world. And like, that's not the, that energy that pushes us, I don't think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I actually do kind of agree with that post too, to some degree. I just think that it's so fucking disempowering for a woman who has just birthed her child, isn't maybe working directly on career or actioning a lot of things in her life, who is, looking after a newborn child or healing after trauma. It's so fucking disempowering for someone like that to think, oh, well, masculine energy is I'm not doing anything, so I'm in my feminine energy, which means I'm not doing anything. And it's just not true. Like, I think that we need to get out of this perspective that everything is just black and white and everything has just one layer. There are so many layers to both the masculine and the feminine energy. And when you look at it from this very surface layer perspective, it just takes away from the power of what the energy and the frequency is actually about. Like, masculine energy is so powerful, but it can also cause you to stand still, and same with the feminine energy. It's just, I want to rewrite this story a little bit, and I think that it's important to talk more so about the feminine energy today, because we're still having to rewrite the story as women telling this story as well. Like, we all know that a lot of the education, a lot of the ways in which we structure our society is based off a man's perspective and a man's foundation. Their whole hormonal system is literally a working day. So it's important for women to talk about this, because we do harness this energy. Everybody harnesses this energy, but we have a really close proximity to this energy currently. So yeah, I think it is important to talk about.
Absolutely. And it's not to throw shade, as you said, to our masculine energy, which is very much our counterpart in our own energetic field. This isn't like us pointing the finger at masculine energy from anyone else. It's not even pointing the finger at masculine energy. It's just acknowledging them both as their equal, because I feel like in this space still, and it's become a trend actually, this whole soft feminine energy. Like the actual I'm pretty sure you guys have seen like hashtag soft girl era, right? Where that's just like just going with the flow, like just taking lots of time to give yourself self-care and like flowing around the place, which is beautiful. I think that that's so important, and it is really crucial that we do spend time with ourselves and that we do give ourselves that love and nourishment that we need and that care that we need, but also acknowledging that maybe we're using the wrong language around that, and that's not so much, dropping into your divine feminine energy at all. That's just honoring yourself and carrying out practices to support in doing that. I think the fact that it's been labeled as divine feminine energy, and I see it all of the time. I see it all the time, especially online. I've seen people who work in the industry and they're like, oh, I'm just dropping into my divine feminine today and spending the day at home cutting up vegetables and eating soup. And it's like, no, that's actually not divine feminine energy. That's just you wanting to chill the fuck out that day. Like, we don't need to label it like that. And I think that in doing that and putting that label that we're actually not fully educated onto something like that, it kind of sets the tone for how the people that, you know, the men and women after us that come through are going to portray that particular field of energy. So I agree. I think that we do really need to rewrite the story, because the divine feminine energy is creative life force, right? That's what birthed, well, I mean, the unification of both those energies birthed the universe. But if it wasn't for that creative flow of the divine feminine energy being involved in that, we wouldn't be here, right? And I'm not trying to say that one's more important than the other. I feel like I need to really disclose this really strongly in this conversation, in this dialogue, because that is not what we're doing. I just feel like it needs to be acknowledged and we need to understand it more, because I feel like it's really misunderstood.
Yeah, very true. And I think you were onto something there too before, where you were like, you know, when we separate these energies and we tell one part of one story without telling the other, or one perspective, and we're not kind of going deeper than that, we really close off the opportunity to learn about it more. And we really distinguish between them and we separate them and they're meant to coexist together. I think this is also forgotten, that we don't actually have to live in a world where we're in our masculine energy all day and then we come home and we step into our feminine energy. Like, they're actually meant to coexist together. They're meant to both support one another in you moving throughout your day-to-day life, but also existing on this planet. And like what you said, without that creative life force energy that does come from the feminine, we couldn't have that supportive, structural, masculine energy that wants to give a space for this life force to originate and expand and open up and grow. It's such a beautiful synergy of energy, but they need to coexist. And all I'm seeing at the moment is like, divine feminine. And like, it's just like, it's not the whole story. I want to just open it up a little bit more. But I'd love to hear, because I know that you've worked with Lilith, who is like more dark feminine energy. And I have heard quite a few women in particular talk about they are stepping more into their dark feminine energy. I want to know like what that means to you, because I've also had the encounter of somebody saying that I am working directly with Satan now that I am working with Lilith, and that I am single-handedly supporting these awful events that are happening all around the world, which is just so not true. And I'd love to educate people who are open to hearing a little bit more about what dark feminine actually is.
Oh, I love this. I love this conversation already. I think what that whole concept is rooted from, and I do believe that a big portion of the spiritual community is actually still programmed to be afraid of that dark, divine, feminine energy, right? And it's not their fault, per se. Not their fault. It's just the fact that we're still so heavily conditioned to push down a strong woman, right? She's too loud. She's too much. Like, she just needs to be quiet and get in line. Absolutely. And we think that we have progressed, you know, in the last 100 or so years, but really we haven't progressed that much when you look at it, because we're still trying to be silent. It's like people are still trying to say that we're too much, right? And it comes up in really big ways, but then it also still comes up in really small ways. You know, I still have people that, you know, sometimes comment on like the stories that I post and they're like, oh, that's a bit too much. And I'm like, well, it's
really?
Yeah. And it only comes from their own uncomfortability, right? Their own, you know, rejection of self, rejection of their dark feminine, right? And their own vulnerabilities that they push away. And I think that's where it's rooted from. So like your experience with that encounter itself is so fear-based, and it doesn't make sense. But at the same time, I hold a lot of empathy for people that are operating in that way, that actually truly believe that there is like this evil force out there. Because once you understand energy and you understand the universe, you come to know that we are all reflections of each other. What you see in one person is what you see in yourself to some degree, right? And what you put in the cave, you also enter the cave with, and you live in that cave with. So if you're going to point the finger and say that is that, or state that something is, then you are that as well, right? So it really puts things into perspective when you look at it from that way, that angle. It is what you see it as, and it is what you are. And you know, the dark feminine energy, that Lilith energy, is, I think it's so divine. It is just as divine as any other energy out there, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what just came to me as you were saying that, like that ability to see something as it is but not see it in yourself the same way that you see it out in the world, that's actually your unconscious programming. So it's like, sometimes when things are installed in our unconscious, or we have an unconscious bias, it's very, very hard for us to see that internally or see that clearly, right? The unconscious is the unseen. It's the parts of ourselves that we can't really quite catch a glimpse of in the mirror. But if we see it out in the world, we're able to recognize it, but we're not able to identify with it. And so when you see that out in the world and you place those judgments, it is an opportunity to say, does this actually live within my subconscious or my unconscious programming? And is this something that I still want to carry? Because again, we're going back to the basics of energetics. Like, we are all interconnected, and we are always going to be doing this work of seeing energy portray itself out in the universe, seeing it reflected in us at some capacity, and then rewriting that story consciously, rewiring, rebirthing, and that's that feminine energy too. And then, you know, placing up a new mirror for other people to see, giving them a new opportunity to see energy from a different perspective. And I think that's what comes with this whole Lilith story. Of course, to some degree, there is energy out there that is hurtful, that is harmful, but is it the truth that I want to carry? That there is evil energy out there that's trying to harm me? No, there's no fucking way that is existing in my field, right? And if we know the story of Lilith, which we have talked about on this podcast, go and listen to that. Aleisha gives a really good overview of, you know, how Lilith came to be and her origin story. I think it's such a powerful way to rewrite things in a way that is actually going to be benefiting the collective, rather than installing more fear and keeping us more stuck in our ego, which we are moving away from, you know?
Yeah. I think that it needs to be spoken about more, and I think that you brought up a really important point too, in that you kind of get to choose how that story impacts you, right? You get to choose what you want to do with that story and how you want to project that out into the world through your actions and your presence and the way that you show up. I think that it's so important, and women around, like women, so many women I, you know, see and that I, you know, witness are still rejecting that. And it makes me sad. And I feel like that's kind of the driving factor as to why we both probably feel so damn called to keep bringing this up and speaking about it and just voicing this, because it's so important, and it's just as important as anything else, and we need to stop rejecting it. I think that you don't realize the impact of welcoming in all forms of divine feminine energy until you actually call it in. And then you realize you've just kind of been working with one piece of the puzzle. And then when you kind of, because obviously light and dark, like this whole universe is made up of light and dark, right? As is with, everything on this earth as well. Like it just, shrinks down to the, you, which is also made of light and dark. So I feel like once you acknowledge that and know that there's so many different facets and so many different pieces to work with, and you stop rejecting them and you call them in and you see how they feel and what you can do with those tools, I think that it really progresses you in your spiritual journey, and it really enlightens you to, a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have seen elsewhere.
100%. Yeah, totally. And I think, it's important, like we always talk about, you choose your own journey, you choose what resonates for you and what doesn't. If Lilith doesn't resonate with you, that's cool. That's not your path. But divine, dark, feminine as a whole is something that we should embrace. It's something that we should get to know, because it also represents the shadowy aspects of ourselves, the parts of us that have gone through trauma, that feel unloved, that feel rejected, that feel pain. And if we're casting a shadow on those parts of ourselves internally, what are we doing for our peers? What are we doing for our friends, our loved ones? Like, I think at the core of everything is unconditional love, and it is a journey. It takes some work to be able to get there, because we do live on a planet with challenges, and with this darker energy, we are collectively going through a lesson of what is unconditional love truly. And I think that when I started to work with those shadowy aspects of myself, the parts of me that didn't feel love, that do feel shame, it felt really resonant with dark feminine energy, because I felt cast out too. And when I got to see that part of myself and just love her unconditionally, not want to change her, I really just felt like I understood the story of Lilith more. I understood other women more. It just gave me so much more peace when I saw other women kind of doing their thing or getting upset. Like, confrontation, especially in women, is really foreign to me. Confrontation in men is very common, but in women specifically, for me, it feels really like I don't understand what's happening. And so when I saw that reflected out in other women, if they got upset, like, the whole Karen thing, like after working and seeing that, I'm like, why do we hate on Karen so much? Like, unpopular opinion, but like, yeah, maybe Karen's a little bit of a bitch, but also like, let her do her. Like, she is standing up for what she believes in. And even if she's not right to a wider audience, I think it is so fucking outdated to be judging women when we too haven't even, stood in their shoes or looked at ourselves properly. I don't know. That's my rant for today anyway.
I mean, it definitely wasn't a woman that came up with that Karen term. 100%.
Oh my
Let's be honest. I mean, I say bring back the rise of the Karen. I feel like.
You know what? I actually stepped into my Karen energy on the weekend for the first time, and let me tell you.
I need the story.
I've never ever complained about my food. I've never said anything back. I've never gone in after getting takeaway and said, look, this wasn't up to standard. But this weekend I did. Their coffee shop gave me a shot of espresso for my child's baby chino. And if you're a mum, this is World War III pending happening if your child has any more caffeine in their life. And I went back in and I said, look, this was for my child. A baby chino, as I told them how to make it. She looked at me stupid and I was like, can you please remake it? and they literally made me wait 20 fucking minutes, and I was mad. I was pissed. And I, in that moment, was like, you shouldn't say anything. You shouldn't go up. Just be quiet. You don't want to cause a scene. All of this was happening internally. Like, I literally got sweaty, and I went up and I said something, and I was like, I would really love to speak to your manager. I was really calm about it. And you know what? I walked away and I was like, I'm proud of how I handled that, because I didn't yell, but I also stood up for myself, and like, I'm paying money for this, you know? So it was just really interesting watching that all play out, and I felt really good after.
Yeah, and you were kind of speaking up too, in that sense, if you were to strip it back, the fact that they were the ones that made the mistake in the first place, so why make you wait 20 minutes? I've worked in hospitality, I've been a barista before. You literally save like a quarter of a cup of milk at the end of making a coffee. Slog it into a mini cup. It takes 2 seconds to make a cappuccino. Like, it should not have taken 20 minutes. That was like resentment from them coming through on their behalf quite clearly. So good on you for speaking up. And it's those little things that have been labeled, right? They've been labeled as bad, like bad, rude, out of line, you know, and all of that kind of root from the principles of the dark, like, feminine energy center that we all have. And that's also why we've kind of like labeled, like, you know, like the light, divine feminine energy. It's like just seen as light and almost flippant in a way. It's labeled and seen as really flippant and like, huh? You know, I just don't know. We need to get that out of our brains, because it's honestly everything but that when you incorporate all aspects of the divine feminine energy system. And we need to start thinking about that aspect of stuff. I think that it is really offensive and really discrediting to see that, just looping back to what we were speaking about at the start. We shouldn't be seeing those references. We shouldn't be seeing people speak about it or, you know, claim to understand it and then explain it as sitting around doing nothing, right? The divine feminine energy could be you standing up for yourself, or you stating what you want or what you desire or what you need, right? Or creating like the most incredible body of work. Like, why is it always attributed to the masculine?
Yeah. Got me. I have no fucking idea, but it's annoying. It really is. And I think it's in those little moments of sending your food back, asking for what you want, exactly what you were saying, that you do initiate this sense of safety in your body that says, hey, divine feminine can be here right alongside the masculine. And we're all about bringing safety in the body so that we feel good to journey up through those higher frequencies and allow ourselves to fully be here. And I think it's so, so, so important. I'm curious, I want to hear from the community. What is something that you can do to make a stand for your divine feminine energy, whether it is light or whether it is dark? Let's just like focus on the femme energy for now that's in us. I think it would be really powerful to also do masculine energy, but we're on the topic of feminine energy, so let's go with that. But yeah, I really want to hear from everybody what's something you can do, because it's important to put this into practice and not just leave this conversation and be like, okay, cool, that's like, now I have a little bit more knowledge about feminine energy. It's like, no, how can we implement this into our life? Because you are never going to see change really rippled out at the impact and intensity that you would if you actioned it in your life. So that's my little challenge to the community.
Yeah, and if you are a space holder or you speak about energy within your space or your business, and you maybe have been unaware of this aspect of divine feminine energy, can we do better? Yeah, I love how you're having a rant and I'm like, we need to do better. Honestly, as women in this space, we truly do need to lead by example, and we need to be better, whether that means going out and educating yourself a little bit more about energy. But it's crucial that we get this right now for the people that are going to come after us into this space, to have that wholesome understanding of what, divine feminine energy is and what it, what all the aspects of it, not just one. So can we please together all do better when it comes to speaking about this and understanding it as a whole?
Yeah, definitely. And I know that a lot of people in our community have been going through a lot of imposter syndrome lately, but truly your perspective on this matter is really, really important. And sharing your own journey with this is so, so powerful, because it's not just Aleisha and my perspective that matters, it's yours too. And that's why it is important to share, what you've learned along your journey too, and hear other people's opinions. So it really, really does matter. I know that next week we want to talk about a couple of different things, but we actually need your input, dear community. So keep an eye out on the stories. We want to be posting a couple of different Q&As. We want to be asking for your input, because that is going to be the content for the next couple of weeks' episodes. We're really excited too, because they are some really awesome topic ideas, and I think it's going to be really fun to see, what comes about in the conversation that sparks.
Yeah, it is going to be so fun.
Yes, it is. But we are so grateful to have you here. And of course, if you know anybody who would resonate with this message or wants to hear it, please pass it along, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, even passing along our Instagram. Every little bit helps. It really, really does. I know it's easy to get into this routine of listening to a piece of content or absorbing content and moving straight on. But even on Instagram, liking, sharing, sharing the podcast link with friends really, really does help, and we appreciate every little bit. So we will see you next week. But until then, bye guys.
Bye.